tell me what happened with your mother, and then tell me how you eat.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was really sad. She, for 8 years, struggled with Lewy body dementia. And for most of that time, I was there with her, just a concerned son trying to do what I could to help improve things. But one of the earliest insights that I was able to glean from the literature, which is, I think, counterintuitive, and most people are completely unaware of this, is that, you know, these, as we alluded to earlier, these conditions don't begin overnight. They take decades to manifest. So, you know, essentially dementia and many of these kinds of conditions that are now saddling modern society, these are diseases of midlife with symptoms that appear in late life. But by the time you're diagnosed with dementia, I mean, you're essentially in the late stage of that disease.
Right, yeah.
And that's why Alzheimer's drug trials have a 99.6% fail rate, because you're trying to treat the condition, you know, well past the point at which, you know, a simple, pharmacological solution is going to have any sort of practical impact.
Right. So even if the thing is that at that point, even if the drug stops the disease cold, a tremendous amount of damage has already been done.
Already done.
So it would not only have to stop it, it would have to heal it.
Yeah, I mean...
And that's hard with neural tissue.
Yeah. I mean, you know, how are you going to get back the 50% of dopamine-producing neurons, you know, in the substantia nigra?
Right.
Like, you're just not. And with Alzheimer's disease, by the time, you know, a person is diagnosed, you know, one of the salient features of Alzheimer's disease is what's called glucose hypometabolism. So this plays into the type 3 diabetes, you know, as it's been termed, that by the time you're diagnosed with the condition, your brain's ability to derive energy, to create energy from glucose, which is its primary fuel substrate, is diminished by about 50%. And the brain is a ravenous consumer of glucose. It makes up 25% of your basal metabolic rate, despite only accounting for 2 to 3% of your body's mass. So it's a ravenous consumer of energy. And so any power outage in that organ is going to lead to failure. And so by the time you're diagnosed, you know, that's already, you know, starkly diminished. And so, yeah, it wasn't really positive. I mean, in every doctor's office, what I experienced with my mom, I've come to call diagnose and adios. And, you know, a physician would essentially prescribe a new drug or titrate up the dose of something that she was already on, but minimally effective, if effective at all. And by the time my mom passed in 2018, she was on 14 different pharmaceuticals.
Right.
And there's no physician on earth who can predict the way these 14 different drugs.
No. Not even two, probably not even two.
Yeah.
Certainly not 14.
Not even God knows. And so the level of toxicity, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't to say if there was that blockbuster drug that came along that I wouldn't, you know, be first in line at that time to fill that prescription for my mom, but it's just very unlikely to be the case. In fact, there's all kinds of fraud, you know, within the field of Alzheimer's drug research that, you know, came out a couple of years ago, which is something that was incredibly disheartening. There was a paper, you know, published in 2006, for example, that was like completely fraudulent. Finally, actually, over the past week, in fact, they finally are pulling that paper. They're retracting the paper. But it was a paper that renewed interest or renewed, you know, the funding pipeline for this drug target, the amyloid hypothesis of Alzheimer's disease, where, you know, in 2006, a researcher at the University of Minnesota, basically what he did was he claimed to have identified this subtype of amyloid that was responsible for the cognitive decline, which was a big sort of the missing link, essentially, connecting this really druggable target, right? The amyloid beta plaque that accumulates in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. And drug research, he claimed to have found it in this 2006 paper, you know, which had subsequently been referenced thousands of times in the medical literature, you know, continued to, you know, foment this like the glut of research money, you know, going down this amyloid hypothesis pipeline for Alzheimer's drug research, which was completely fraudulent. That paper is now finally being retracted.
Oh, God.
But it's just like, that's the situation, you know? And so, It was, incredibly disheartening. I did get my mom on an exercise regimen, which I thought was helpful, at the very least in terms of lifting her spirits, but I think probably played a role in slowing the progression of the disease somewhat. With a Parkinson's condition, exercise is it's important for everybody, essentially. It's important for people with Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, any form of dementia, really. But with Parkinson's disease, there seems to be really good data there. But ultimately, nothing really helped, and so it was really sad. And then Labor Day of 2018, my mom was actually diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and passed away 3 months later. So this is where I think part of what separates me from, I think, other people in the space is that, the degree of sickness that I've seen firsthand, profound. And it occurred to the person who meant the most to me of anybody in the world. And I saw up close and personal the dearth of treatment options, the diagnose and adios of it all. And I was very privileged in the sense that I grew up in New York City. I got to go to cathedrals to Western medicine, the Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, NYU, Columbia. I mean, I've been to them all with my mom. And it became so important. Once I learned that these conditions take decades to foment, it became so important to me. The most important thing in my life.
People do to learn what you know and what they should do relatively rapidly.
Well,
your books.
Yeah, I think.
Which is there one in particular?
Genius Foods is a nutritional care manual to the brain. It's an encyclopedia of, it came out 6 years ago. There's not much that I would change in the book, maybe a few tweaks here and there, but in general, the science has really stood the test of time. Which was my intent in writing the book. And so, it really is everything that a person needs to know. But from a high level, Little Empty Boxes, my documentary, this is the first documentary ever to tackle dementia through the lens of prevention. And so anybody who's ever experienced dementia, they're going to find incredible solace in the film and seeing what it was in my family.
And where can they get access to Little Empty Boxes?
So it's available for pre-order now at littleemptyboxes.com.
Okay, littleemptyboxes.com. Do you want to just run over the description of the film for us and tell us how you made it, why? Well, we know why, but what's the film about and what'll it offer people?
So this is the...
Okay, here's Kathy Lugavere.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I just clipped some coupons that I'm gonna never use. I'm gonna kiss my son Max right now, who's holding the camera.
How's Mom?
It's like her brain has low RAM.
Do you remember what the date is today? Well, how about the month?
No.
We know that Alzheimer's disease starts in the brain at least 20 to 30 years before the first symptom of memory loss. The million-dollar question, actually probably the trillion-dollar question, is why do people get Alzheimer's disease?
The rates of Alzheimer's have skyrocketed. What did we change?
The federal government in 1980 starts its guidelines. You take away butter, meat, dairy, eggs, cheese, all those things you ate. What do you eat on your plate? What's left?
The brain only takes as much sugar as it needs. The overall problem is inflammation. Inflammation burns. What happens in Alzheimer's is you have low inflammation, but chronic low inflammation.
This is the aisle of food-like products.
Diet, stress, sleep, toxins, all these things have a huge impact. The question is, how far gone are you before it's irreversible?
I hope I'm a good mother.
You're an okay mother. I need to go back and be closer with my mom.
I don't want really to take so many x-rays. Get me out of here.
The best way to explain the inexplicable is to compare the human genome as a piano with 23,000 notes. You need to struck 300 of these 23,000 notes to play the song Alzheimer. It's not destiny that you develop this.
Diseases like Alzheimer's start long before the symptoms are seen. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
You've done all the tests.
But it's not enough. You've got to be there to help me.
Ma, he said you still got it.
You still got it. You still do.
Here they are in the park for the first time.
So now it's really up to us, so we'll do our best.
So this project is the first thing that I ever did in this space. And this is before I had the knowledge that led to subsequently my books, my podcast. I have a podcast called The Genius Life. The documentary is a time capsule of me just being a terrified son, doing whatever is humanly possible in the realm of diet, lifestyle, initiating this investigation that ultimately would become my life's work, but to try to help my mom. And it's an incredible, I think, human interest story. It's something that I think anybody, who's ever had a sick loved one, will relate to. And it's mostly a very intimate peek into what it's like to not just have dementia, but to be a caregiver. And it also, with very broad strokes, paints what a roadmap towards prevention might look like.
I see.
So it's not it doesn't provide easy answers, a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not one of these diet documentaries that's like promoting an agenda. It's just like, let's get back to reason and common sense when it comes to diet and undo a lot of these mistruths that we've been force-fed, no pun intended, over the past few decades. That has really, in many ways, affected us all. It's affected us all. I mean, it's ingrained.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Here's another pun. It's ingrained.
God only knows how it's affected us because we don't know how erratic a population that's radically unhealthy will become.
Yeah.
Right. And we may well find out.
Yeah, and we're all getting older. I mean, the oldest millennial now is in their 40s, right? So now is the time. And so it's a film that I think really, reveals what is, I think, the most important question of our time. And yeah, I think it's the most important